All right, so welcome. I'm Dan Plaat, the acting and or named chair of the Albany County Green Party. So I'm here to just do these regular onboarding sessions. Though onboarding is usually someone new to the county org and getting them situated with a committee. This is more of an onboarding for the Green Party in general, going over our values, our goals, our challenges, and even including our internal conflicts, which are actually more pertinent to the left overall as well, but just how they're expressed in the Green Party. But first and foremost, um, we're an independent left-wing party, but just go forward with. But that's more covered at the in the last section. So first is the 10 key values of the Green Party. These values are used to approve or argue for platform planks and guide our decisions. Most other considerations are related to the optics of our decisions. We weigh the reaction and the opinions of the general public against potential audiences and populations that we are focused on for recruitment. Otherwise, these are the assumptive statements with the applied goals of these values with which we phrase that we seek to do this. Um, First is, oh, there we go. I just need to click. First is grassroots democracy. All human beings must be allowed a say in decisions that affect their lives. No one should be subject to the will of another. We seek to improve public participation in every aspect of government and seek to ensure accountability in public representatives. This usually means expanding participatory democracy overall as well. Click. Our second value is social justice and equal opportunity. All persons must have the opportunity to benefit equally from the resources afforded us by society and the environment. We must confront personal and structural discrimination. The current list of the forms this takes include race, class, gender, sexual orientation, age, nationality, religion, and ability. Number three, ecological wisdom, of which what I'm reading does match what's on the slides. As we go forward, the slides will be more pictures, and I'll have more text. As values, these are just simple little boilerplates, so it makes sense to have the text up. So, ecological wisdom, human society, we seek to form human societies that are not separate from nature. We seek to maintain an ecological balance within resource limits, to develop a sustainable society in which future generations will benefit. Employ regenerative agriculture and an energy efficient economy. That wording is particular, and lifestyles that respect the integrity of natural systems. Number four is nonviolence. We seek to develop effective alternatives to the current patterns of violence. So, not just violence in some abstract way or violence as in violent crime, but the patterns of violence of our society. We recognize the need, but while so, we recognize the need for self defense and the defense of others. This can create sticky situations. But otherwise, we seek to demilitarize and eliminate weapons of mass destruction. We promote nonviolent methods of opposition and take action towards peacemaking on all levels. Number five is decentralization. So we start with a conclusion or a topic statement that the centralization of wealth and power is what contributes to the various injustices we live with. So we seek to restructure society's institutions away from being controlled by a few, keeping as much decision making as possible at individual and local levels, which assures or while assuring civil rights protections. Which means that though the value is decentralization, there is also a kind of a value in federalization as well. That can be at odds with that. More on that later. Number six is community-based economics. So this is sort of a combination of the first three values, or at least based on those first three values, we then conclude that significant economic reform is needed. This means redesigning work structures for employee ownership and workplace democracy. It means developing new economic activities and institutions that use technology in humane, liberatory, ecological, responsive, and accountable ways. Not so much in that order or any order. It means establishing basic economic security for all and moving towards cooperative and democratic definitions of work, jobs, and income. This includes social labor in the system of income distribution itself. It means restricting the size and power of corporations without discouraging their positives, which could mean flip markets, flexible investment, as well as the type of organizations that internalize various costs. Number seven is feminism and gender equity. We have inherited a social system based on male domination, the patriarchy, also known as. We oppose this system such that the processes of deciding our actions are equally important as achieving outcomes. So this has to do with the question of means and ends, meaning we do not choose between one or the other. We seek to replace cultural ethics of domination and control, which is what defines patriarchy for the most part, and replace it with cooperation and respect for differences, allowing for the values of gender equity, interpersonal responsibility, and honesty are developed with a moral conscience. That is what we seek to do. Number eight is respect for diversity. We recognize the importance of cultural, ethnic, racial, sexual, religious, and spiritual diversity and seek to promote the development of respectful relationships across the human spectrum. We seek to reflect on the diverse elements of society and organizations and decision-making bodies and prioritize leadership of people traditionally closed out of such roles. This also includes respect for all life forms and thus we seek to increase preservation of biodiversity. So it's not just human diversity, also biodiversity. Number nine is personal and global responsibility. We seek to foster peace, economic justice, and health, or we recognize that doing these three things requires joining with people and organizations from around the world. At the same time, individuals need to act, or we seek to act, to improve our own personal well-being individually and enhance ecological and social harmony, typified by the motto, think globally, act locally. And number 10 is future focus and sustainability. Our actions and policies should be motivated by long-term goals. We seek to protect valuable natural resources, to safely dissolve or reuse all waste we create. We seek to develop a sustainable economics independent of continual expansion. That means growth, but particularly capitalist growth. We seek to balance the drive for short-term surpluses with economic development, technology, and fiscal policies that are responsible rather to inheriting future generations. So the focus of policy is on the quality of all lives rather than open-ended economic growth. Let me just check. I got a message. I want to see if it's relevant to this. It is not. So this next section is about General Green Party history. So this is starts with the historical context for the formation of the Green Party itself. So historically speaking, when in crisis, new parties are formed to address what the current government is incapable of addressing, or an existing major party rejuvenates via some grassroots movements. In U.S. history, the pattern of a 40-year cycle of such developments, whether it be anti-federalists, Republicans, populists, and then reform movements in the Democrats in the 1930s and then the 1970s, and then in the 2010s, saw movements attempt to shift within the major attempt a shift within the major parties, but no major change in direction, though changes in the makeup of the party usually result. Meanwhile, outsiders have also shifted. So in the 1970s, Green parties were formed in response to the ecological damage and alongside other environmental movements of the 70s. The result is that environmental regulations have become the norm in the last 40, 50 years. But in the last decade, the climate crisis required larger change, so a refocus on economic reform, along with a return to class politics, has developed. And this is where we get into more of my own analysis, but I'm combining it with Green Party history on, I think, as listed, or rather written on the National Party site. So that's my major source for this. In other sections of this, it is also more of, I think, I draw from other articles, as well as my own sort of analysis. So there'll be, there's definitely areas where it's, I'm not working completely off of objective fact, but framings. So in America, the Greens formed in that important year, 1984. A committee was formed to start an environmental movement organization. They were in part inspired by the West German Greens and adopted their four pillars and statement of values, which eventually turned into our 10 key values, and focused on forming a coalition of local and state level organizations. In 1987, 3 years later, a national gathering of such activists was attended by about 600 people who set general policies. Then, 2 years later, a second one was held in '89, which focused on platform writing and came to some consensus on pursuing an electoral strategy, which meant being a political party. However, others wanted the organization to be more movement focused. This became the source of conflict during the meetings of the early '90s, represented by um, a argument over defining what membership was, either based on the rules of being an electoral party, which meant anyone who's registered, or like that of some kind of union or vanguard party. So thus two groups formed. First, there were the Greens, or GPUSA. This was a dues-based and labor-focused um, organization, while those that were focused on more electoral politics, and the Greens as electoral party, formed the Association of State Green Parties, or ASGP. As state parties were formed, the two groups competed for which they would associate with. There were about 40 of them overall. After most of them affiliated with the Association of State Green Parties, a unity meeting took place in 2000. Now, a full fusing of the two weren't completed, but enough was worked out that a majority of the GPUSA folded over. Um, Especially after 2000, and by 2001, the Association of State Green Parties then renamed itself GPUS, Current National. Also in 2001, the 10 key values were revised to match the then forming Global Greens, which was then made up of 72 national parties. Let's see. Yep. So next, some words on our presidential runs. Uh, the first one was in 1996, which was Nader and Leduc, which won 700,000 votes with a budget of about $4,000. In 2000, the infamous or famous second run gained about 3 million votes. All the while, more Greens won a growing number of local races and even a few state representative seats. These successes in the Nader campaign provoked a progressive backlash, which blunted overall growth despite ever more people turning out or shifting from the middle, referring to the polarization of American politics after 2000. Nader ran in '04 and '08 as an independent candidate, so instead we ran Cobb and McKinney, which in retrospect were poor showings. Some blame goes to using a safe state strategy, though I I think I've heard since I wrote this that Cobb would say, no, we didn't run a safe state strategy. But I think it was more that there was a split within state parties on doing that or not. So there wasn't really a unified effort to run in all states or not. It was a ongoing argument. Um, but there was also, trying to earn progressive votes. But between a polarizing electorate and unhated candidates like Obama, um, safe state strategy backfires. However, we did have more wins in California and Maine, who are our strongest areas. We had a return to some footing in 2012 with the Stein-Honkla run, with about 500,000 votes. Now, this is a meager result, but it was 3 times the result of 2008. In 2016's run, they nearly doubled this with almost 1 million votes. Hitting such a threshold, though, sparked another backlash from, well, it made the Democrats or just the establishment left, with Russiagate resulting in more barriers and a full media blackout in 2020. The only pattern is that we have more support when both candidates are disliked as party loyalty wanes. In New York, various experiments have been undertaken to resolve various challenges, which I'll go into. The forming of the Green New Deal policy in 2010, having multi county party chapters, and retaining a ballot line for 4 cycles straight, until a recent block by Governor Cuomo on his way out, giving only fusion parties a chance of retaining the ballot, so long as they never run their own candidates for a high office. So I was just including a little recent New York party history. Oh, I think I needed to move this from before. Anything here? Right. Oh, wait. Let's go previous. No, actually, this has to do with so the next section here is a somewhat general overview and heavily biased from myself of our internal conflicts. This is mostly what I've observed. I think I probably need to rewrite this, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible based on what I observe. But it really, like, what I do observe also is that everyone seems to have their own perspective. There's a lot of subjectivity in play with why people don't get along, what they're arguing about, why they're arguing about it. Is it personality? Is it just someone blackballing? Sometimes there's a lack of theory, so you end up sort of thinking there's a conspiracy when people aren't your friends. Um, anyway, so this can be taken as our dirty laundry, but it's what I'm covering are also the big issues of theory and practice, which for the most part have not yet been solved even after 150 years of the left, or they're the type of issues that have dogged the left the entire history. But covering them provides an opportunity for ourselves to think about them and the kinds of friendly arguments we can have, or provide some context. So the first, as mentioned, was the question of, well, not mentioned, but is the question of what is our, well, as I was mentioned by the in the 90s, what is our party meant to do? So there's a line of thought that we are a prefiguration movement. We're out there building dual power with projects and campaigns, issue campaigns, alongside social movements to eventually negate state power or overcome it. The other is that we are an electoral force for electing lawmakers, which allows social movements to take power and push our own agenda on our own terms. So there's a choice of building, another choice is building community. Well, sorry. So they come in the form of building community for social power or solidarity for political power. My take is that we all sort of want a little bit of both. Which you prefer, first and foremost, may depend on what political thinkers you're influenced by or what social class one is in or comes from. People, of course, constantly shift their opinions or what they're geared towards. At least I'm referring to myself in that way. Conflicts can arise from personalities and other failures of organization, though. But often at the heart, they develop around how to address our ongoing challenges, which I'll go into later. Usually not an either or choice because it's a matter of sometimes limited resources. So you have to choose one, even though two sides could be right or have good points. Um, but there's always there's a mention or there's a position that having a united position is more effective, and others are prefer more diversity. Regardless of the perspective, overall registered members or party, and this I've rewrote this during the day, but then my file got lost. So, but regardless of what, like maybe there's a vast majority of different tendencies in the Green Party, we are at least members and activists united over a rejection of neoliberal centrism. This is at least what we all have in common. There is also a rejection of oppositional categories, and this is more of a cultural thing in the 90s. A rejection of oppositional categories, which could lead into the splitting of sectarian factions. So more like let's not use labels. It sort of leads to the sort of Canadian Party, Green Party motto of like we're not left or right, we're forward. That itself is a sort of line. Um, so as another, let's see, and as the organization, or rather, the party develops or exists, there's been debates over the meaning of certain key values. One is what do we mean by environmental and focus and sustainability? There's a line or a line of thought from Murray Bookchin, which focuses on human liberation via social and economic justice. Or there's also a perspective from deep ecology, represented by a thinker named Nays, which focuses on saving the environment by any and all means, which probably wasn't popular. I think I put this in because, at least in environmental movement circles, these are the debates happening, and so many reject or don't are interested in the Green Party because we're just not into direct action enough. But this led to some post-left directions like eco-terrorism, primitivism, and other direct action strategies. The other leads to social movement organizing as left socialists. Since I wrote this side note, I've sort of read about the sort of like the three main tendencies of the American left. One is sort of very much about militancy and whether a protest is the right level of militancy or not. Another is a sort of a government socialist. These are more entryists, people who we may we may fit in different categories. Another is the kind of a activist center, which is made up of hobbyists or those who are doing media projects. So I feel like the Green Party can be all of these three things and none of them. But another meta question is the classic reform or revolution. Do we take a principled stand against the establishment at all times, or do we accommodate to power when there's opportunity? If and when we gain office, should we obstruct and take a kind of accelerationist stance where, we obstruct everything, assuming that any state action always hurts workers, which can create mass change, but is highly risky. And we don't know what kind of change could be caused by such acceleration of crisis. Or when we seek office, are we meant to accommodate in a low risk manner, which continues the system, but will likely improve conditions? A third line of thought is that we must act to create opportunities for more radical movements with non-reformist reforms. This is the one I'm taking, so I include it. Next is the meaning of green economics. Does it mean a heavily relegated capitalism? Does it mean nationalizing industries? Sustainable capitalist growth or steady state economics, represented by degrowth? To allow for flexibility of our platform, we've crafted inclusive language, quote unquote, a transition to post capitalism is what we seek, which rules out green capitalism after enough greenwashing and neoliberal climate change policies, but also allows all manner of approaches based on the candidate. And I'm going to include this as far as on the as a left issue here. On the focus of feminism, there is a flashpoint on trans rights. TERFs or gender critical, and I'm only using this just to be to steel man. They frame when they're not being well. They frame the oppression of women along biological sex, and so rights are based on sex and are then opposed to postmodern waves of feminism, which frame sexism as being based in social or self-identity, which would mean rights are then based in gender expression, or that the goal is to abolish any such roles on sex and gender. It's usually a disagreement on how to do this. Um, though the gender critical side, TERF side, kind of make a mistake that the basically critical theories on gender and sex. There's a mistake that one is materialist while the other is not. But social conditions, as well as our own identities, are known to be based in material relationships, which do include the biological, which doesn't ignore it. This. So, but recently there has been a split, or at least disagreements on vaccine mandates before and during the pandemic. The values of bodily autonomy and with opposition to big pharma clash with values of general welfare or public health. This plays on the conflict of standing on principle versus accommodating to our present reality. At least that's how I see it. As partisan Greens are compared to Democrats, there are those that call us sellouts for believing the government can handle something like a public health crisis, even as we critique that handling. Other smaller conflicts, or maybe it's a large one, emerge around foreign policy flashpoints like the war in Ukraine. Actually, I think I should be. Yeah, so here's those internal debates. Sorry, I should be clicking through. Um, so have I gotten here yet? Yeah. So trans rights, public health mandates, anti-imperialism, red baiting fears. Small conflicts emerge over like the war in Ukraine. We oppose as a part of U.S. imperialism, which is we hopefully is represented by a rejection of all military aid. But this counters a lot of others on the left, including the left itself of Ukraine, who want solidarity for their self-defense and resistance, which is in line with our nonviolence value. So, what counts as escalation versus peacemaking in a multipolar world? Clearly, we reject taking sides between interstate competition, but what neutrality is there to have, especially when being neutral is taking a side? But what side are we taking? We're trying to take our own side. We're trying to take a working class side. But I think it was argued that, like, well, what about the working class of Ukraine? They're being killed. What about the working class of Russians? Anyway, last and not involved is separate from the key values, is discussions over branding. Many give our brand as a reason for not joining the Greens. I personally consider this a nonsensical cover for other disagreements, but this can involve our symbols, icons, or the name Green Party itself. This is in light of being watermelons, where we are not just an environmental party, but now that Dems have been talking about also being for a green future, this doesn't really differentiate us much anymore. So there's some maybe talk of rebranding in that way. State orgs, being their own organizations, have different logos and even different names. For example, the Oregon Party is like the Pacific Green Party. Massachusetts is the Rainbow Green Party. Sometimes there's arguments over should we have a more abstract logo sticking with the peace sign or sunflowers. Well, these are the ones that are the most used. And something that I didn't write yet in this version of this is that a good point was made that, or did I read it somewhere? I read it, sorry, I read it in the UK Greens Guide to local organizing and campaigns, that we don't really have a brand because most people don't even know what we've done or we haven't done enough. So our brand is not really just what we look like or what our logo is, but what we're doing. What have we done? And so once we start winning some local offices and start doing substantial things and participating in issue campaigns, that can be our brand. Otherwise, our brand are kind of loser hippies or useful idiots, tools of the right, or worse. So that's wraps up that section. Does anyone have any comments?
Well, I did ask back when you were talking about the nominees, why did Ralph Nader go independent and leave the Green Party?
Uh, I'll actually go into that right now, actually, in the next section.
Okay.
Um, but it comes down to we in '04 there was a sort of a consensus found in what our relationship to celebrities should be. And so I'm actually going to go. I can answer that question by just continuing.
Okay.
So the next section here is our challenges. And this is also challenges to any independent politics, perhaps, but they're definitely particular to us Greens. So these are sometimes static and moving obstacles. Some are issues of internal work, meaning our own capacity as an organization, and others are systemic barriers, which may apply to any theory of social change that anyone may have. So number one is and these are numbered as well, like the values, our relationship to celebrities. So there are three sides or positions on this issue, on candidates, celebrity candidates, and endorsements. The first is to let popular names do what they want so that they bring attention to the party, which leads to more votes, thus more ballot lines, and more campaign and donations. Second position, which is the opposite, is to not endorse or give any celebrity space because they're usually, well, historically not good team players. They have their own brand, their own following, and so on, their own support lines. And if we really do believe in bottom up politics, we need to grow under our own power and not encourage people who could be de facto leaders or names or faces. I can't tell you how many. It's a trolling instance, but whenever I do my Green Party stuff on TikTok, if it gets enough views, there'll be someone commenting like, "Get rid of Jill Stein, get rid of Jill Stein," just like as if she's the entire party and she's some elected leader. Except Jill Stein is not a celebrity candidate, but I suppose became one by being our candidate three times. Um, But there's a third position, which I believe was the compromise found in the aughts between 2000 and 2004, which was that we support celebrities if they join and support the party. This removes the negative optics on both sides of the equation. The negative optic that we are riding a celebrity's coattails, and the other side that the celebrity is using and exploiting this or our grassroots movements that we work so hard to cultivate or to build up. Uh, and it also creates a positive optics of actually working together. Imagine that. But our historical experience is that such figures, like most Americans, are not joiners and see building such relationships as a restriction. Sometimes it's a matter of activists being immature, dogmatic, or the like. Um, and as a party, we sort of want to be leaderful and avoid having a single name. There are drawbacks to having a single name or leader for a movement, even though that's what many Americans are sort of trained to expect. So it's sort of many of the contradictions of American politics. So to answer your question, Alan, uh, so in '04, there was sort of a split of Green Party leaders, activists, active people, whether or not we should let Ralph be Ralph. And that includes him being basically like, I don't join parties. I'm completely independent. I will never join any party. I'm a party of one. And enough that they're the ones that nominated Cobb that essentially believed that, look, all Nader has to do is change his registration to green and actually join our particular organization. But Ralph Nader has his own organization, I suppose, and so does all these other people that are all the pictures I used. Of the examples of celebrities who either say they're running green, have run to get our nomination. In Cornel West's case, he was a presumptive candidate because we didn't really have anyone else with such recognition. But again, when it came to actually doing meetings with Greens and going to conventions and just appearing and speaking, he basically felt that was a restriction on his freedom to speak his mind or to do the campaign he wanted to do. Those are the words he used. I'm a jazz man. I'm a soloist. Those are his words. So challenge number two is ambivalence and or the ambivalence of or opposition of progressives. Generally, progressives are a section of voters or thought leaders across media who have an emotional connection to the Democratic Party or a commitment to defensive voting, at least. They see themselves as bridging between insiders and outsiders. In practice, this is the position of the writer of an article I'm quoting here. In practice, they accommodate the ruling class via the Democratic Party and usually, or for the most part, get sidelined, or they just collaborate. At the best case, they get restricted. And that's in the best case. In the worst case, they get totally sidelined. Though there are still many in our revolution and in DSA who believe they're um, and I sometimes see their and I do see their perspective is valid that they do make progress. They are electing a lot of actual left-wing people to various offices as Dems. But that is the sort of argument that we're having within the left, always. Let's see. General observation is that there are not really that many of them as a voter bloc, but via media professions hold a large share of the general national mindscape. So then our goal is to provide and grow our own sources of political opinion to compete or counter mainstream framing, to shift audiences towards organized independent politics as the duopoly continues their management of the country on behalf of capitalists, whether they be international or domestic. Recently, there has developed an outsider left, as far as political categories go, who will not join the Democrats fully, but are looking for ways to take action effectively, and so thus may be pulled in, or pulled to anywhere that becomes effective. So that's also a call to be effective. Part three. Sorry, not part three, but rather number three is media snubbing. These next few will be shorter, I promise. So there's a constant struggle to get in debates. Many getting into public debates is like one of the main goals of a lot of different electoral campaigns, which can become a headline, but overall the results and usually it's under the assumption that getting in one debate will get our foot in the door so that the next race, the next campaign, it will be less of a fight to get in the debates. It will be kind of more of a standard that Greens are included. Well, historically, this has not happened. In fact, whenever we do get in debates, it usually means that we will not be in the next debate because we do so well. Um, so it's a losing game. Debates and media are controlled directly or indirectly by capitalist parties. We are covered if there's interest, but we need exposure to gather such interest. At least this is the logic of mass media, even when it's the online left. Or, whether it be independent left YouTubers or podcasts. So 2020, the race in 2020 with Howie Hawkins showed just how bleak the media landscape is. To my observation, very, very few podcasts interviewed him. It was sort of a matter of like they needed to contact him or they tried to contact everyone, but there just wasn't interest in having him on. Not even once. Or if they did, it was only once and not throughout the year. Uh, on the flip side, Greens do get more attention in Maine due to the effect that they have had with their issue campaigns with public financing, ranked choice voting, so, etc. Which leads into number four, winner take all elections. There is a real or perceived ambiguity regarding the Greens about how hard we actually support election reforms like ranked choice voting. This is mostly because it's not the only thing we're doing. At least I've encountered enough times that people ask, why doesn't the Green Party just do ranked choice voting It's sort of assumed we do care about it, even though we do, but it seems like we people assume we don't because we're running for election before getting ranked choice voting on the ballot. So it's like if we really care about winning any race, we should always do this first. If we haven't done that first, it must mean we don't care about it. That's a perception I've encountered. Um, but there's also, I've encountered arguments over what reforms to pursue. Does X, instant runoff voting or ranked choice voting actually help the way we want? In the situations that exist so far, it sort of hasn't, whether it be Maine or in Oregon. But most consciousness is for ranked choice voting. But besides voting systems, there's also the funding for campaigns themselves. Limited data shows that our spending, Green Party spending, when a Green is running for office, it's not really that well correlated with our vote totals. In Maine, there was quite a lot raised for a gubernatorial candidate, and after running multiple times, she raised more money each time, but her vote totals did not increase with that. So there was sort of a ceiling, or it's just a matter of money is not buying more votes or exposure. But it's also at the same time, connections are hard to draw. It's not really exact science with controllable conditions. But we need to keep in touch that, well, keep in mind that lack of money is an obstacle too. Next is a challenge of being decentralized or being effective or being more centralized. So this is one of those contradiction of values. Sorry, that being decentralized sort of conflicts with community economics or other such goals. To have a workable fundraising, media relations, operations, uh, and support, there sort of needs to be a stronger center. At least this is an argument centralists make. We should have an office in DC. We should be able to resolve inter-organizational problems like fights between state parties or between people in such parties um, with conflict resolution from a federal level. But on the flip side, there's a general concern and resistance to the iron law of oligarchy, fearing a division of labor or hierarchies that are formed between a national central, not just authority, but simply just committees, people who do things. You get the result of that. There would be certain people who speak for all Greens. And how is it decided what's appropriate for them to say or do? We don't have very robust communication or sharing of delegation between local, state, and federal level, because as it is now, state parties are the one orgs with the most vested power. So it's sort of a middle level out rather than top down or bottom up. It seems like a compromise of some kind to have state parties be sort of the middle where the authority is. The other side, which is sort of related, is a challenge that the Green Party faces is a slide, fearing a slide to bureaucracy. Sometimes a conflict is what kind of form our organization takes. There is a need for structured coherence as well as spontaneity and innovation. Mass individualism is then in tension with having community standards and accountability. As a party, whether it be county, state, or national level, creates a standard, and then some activists chase at this, saying, "Don't tell me what to do." We're always weighing the balance between rules and policy, as well with the freedom and autonomy of action of members. At least this would be a solution to that, yet to be resolved. Challenge number seven is office holding and the undertow of compromise. So we've sort of learned from other national Green parties. When they have the most electoral success and start staying in power, they, referring to the German Greens in particular, they become the ruling government that then enforces and continues the status quo. Um, the other side of this is to be completely oppositional. There's sort of a contradiction on the left generally that we distrust power, but we also want it. We want to be empowered. A constant solution, or at least the line of thought from the writer, is that we need a constant review of why and when we compromise while staying connected to grassroots and radical positioning so we stay fresh and brash. And number eight is diversity. This is an there's always an intensive self-crit. We're always critical of ourselves about our party's makeup. An early move was to give identities, or to create identity-based caucuses that have voting power in national decisions. We also have gender parity rules. Some progress is made, but for some or people not in the party, it's sort of never enough, or the party does not provide the empowerment that they're seeking. Just look to Cornel West's criticisms. Number nine, challenge number nine, and there's only 10 of them here. Number nine is the global connections that we have, as well as our internationalist stigmas that is put on us. So we walk a tightrope of projecting our stance on international relations. We are operating in the empire that dominates others. We also seek to communicate security through international cooperation in the face of a general nationalism in the public. We're labeled weak, unpatriotic, or even traitorous. But in a multipolar world of the first world and a ever more concentrating second world, not taking a side is to most taking the wrong side. And I point to this comic done by a left winger where at the rally against the war machine, Rage Against the War Machine rally, you had Greens, Jill Stein spoke there, representing that to this left winger, it's the same position, even though we're coming at it completely differently. Or there is some semblance of difference or similarity in not supporting our overseas war making, but for what purposes? Um, that we're taking the side of BRICS, Russia or China, and authoritarian capitalism versus our liberal capitalism. Uh, so yes, and this sometimes puts us at odds with other national Green parties. There is, in fact, I think, a letter last cycle suggesting that we, for the sake of, I think it was the German Greens doing this, they put out an open call that we should not run a presidential candidate because if we help Trump win, it will hurt NATO or hurt Europe's position in the world. Certainly, they probably fear the tariffs and the trade wars that Trump is now instigating. But like last cycle, he was in office, we'll probably need to renege. And the last is the dual burden of postmodern politics. This is a general challenge that even I don't see a solution to, but maybe we can brainstorm. We seek to contest power within a moribund political system that most people don't support. To those who believe it's a broken system, if you want to fix any problems, it's a fixed system if you want to break it open. We also seek to restore confidence in using a political party as a vehicle of change, even among other tactics. But is a widespread disengagement from formal democracy, first from parties themselves, major or otherwise, then from voting altogether. This is usually, and this is over, the course of the last generation or so, a loss of civic consciousness and a fragmented culture. Um, I already rewrote this, but I wrote at this point in the 2010s, America has become more polarized, but to what end? Where are we on time? So I'm almost at an hour. Um, so I have two more sections. One I could probably so first is the I have the structure of the Green Party, and then the other is a summary of the case for a let's see, um, Howie's case for an independent left party, which sort of addresses, at least it's his case for how we address the challenges I just outlined, which I think I will do. Unless everyone would like me to wrap up now. How we feel?
I would be open to you continuing.
Okay.
Yeah, a few minutes anyway.
Yeah, I'll go through. Yeah. So, okay, I'll just rush through this, reading as I go. So, and again, this is something I need to rewrite, so bear with me. So this is a summary of the book that Howie and a few others published, Case for an Independent Left Party. I think this is my summary of an article version that he published via Counterpunch. So first he goes through the sort of problems we're dealing with, or the failures of other strategies, or drawbacks. So first there's the party and a party fusion strategy, which is not new and has deep flaws. They get co-opted by the Democratic Party, and this disallows outside options if you take that strategy. Activists succumb to careerism or a type of realism. Our identity as an alternative is blunted. The left disappears from public view, as the left is not for itself, but becomes a part of centrist politics. We don't make the Dems move left, we make ourselves more centrist. Another version of this is that Christian rock doesn't make rock better, it makes Christianity worse. Another issue is that there is a lack of general socialist politics. A full socialist platform is needed to break the polarized economy of rich and poor. Most reformers, liberal or centrist, reject social ownership and worker self-interest. Sanders' social democratic message is a rehash of last century's vision of regulated capitalism, which also disappeared left-wing politics as an alternative or eliminated it. We were reduced to fighting for improving conditions of exploitation over ending them. And there's also a general history of third parties in America. This is a challenge or an issue in play, that independent politics is not very much valued in America and by the left especially by the left since the popular front strategy of the 1930s. The system bends overall by growing voter rights and enfranchisement. This prevented real class conflict, unlike elsewhere, like in Europe, where workers did in fact need their own parties because their voting rights were withheld. Thus, in America, independence is treated like a tactic when in fact needs to be a strategy for successful social movements. Another issue in play, and especially what put Howie in that Green Party US formation in the 90s, that was more for dues-based membership, not for being electoral party. A flaw of past and current efforts is the co-opting of the corporate structure of major parties. We instead need mass membership organizations made up of people who can hold leaders accountable. Members in parties now don't have rights or responsibilities. Thus, whether it be a nonprofit or third parties, and this can, apply to the Greens as well, they're run like a capitalist business. Campaign committees become monopolies. Primaries and other reformers didn't break boss control. The function of political bosses simply changed, and this is speaking in historical context in the 1920s or the progressive era. That the role of the political boss changed from managing patronage to donor money. Thus, primary candidates are just as pre-selected as in recent cycles, just managed. But there is the precedent of the Socialist Party. Veterans who are veterans of the populace. There are two lessons from their experience in the populist movement is that by the end of the progressive era, that they not have fusion candidates, that their members be due-paying members that could vote on party decisions. Thus, they had actual representation. At the same time, the direct primary and other reforms to end boss rule made political parties a state organ with thus state rules on membership and oversight, which handed power to, in Howie's words, professional managerial class, if you believe in that. But after the Socialist Party was crushed for its subversion, all left-wing parties then followed the atomized membership model, which limits funds and the means of resisting, or rather, speaking of the 50s, limiting funds and the means of resisting the Red Scare and other Cold War dogmas. But he argues on how to unite a working majority, and he goes through a breakdown of America's class system. There's a 2% ruling class of capitalists. There's a 32% middle class of professionals and managers. And then there's a 66% class of workers who can then be categorized into four subgroups. First is a small business sector, because small business owners are usually working their own desk. The second group is the oligarchic corporate sector. The third is the unionized public sector. And the last are workers under supervision, which include prisoners or those on welfare. Or they're being supervised by the police because they're underclass. All of these can be organized based on their shared interests or the shared interests that each of these categories have. Thus, we need accessible forums to discuss problems for self-education and building solidarity between these groups, which in fact do have different levels of education and experiences. Addressing the challenge of breaking through long-standing resentments between these groups, as all sections see each other as competitors. There's the issue of bottom-up organizing versus top-down organizing, top-down mobilizing. So we have mass apathy, which creates alienation from disengagement. But an independent party can fill the vacuum. If it avoids reproducing corporate class structures as business unions do, we can do the education and the lateral communication needed for people to be civically engaged. The educated work with the rest, not manage them, no selling out. Party can be involved or needs to be involved in movement work so that they are not separated. And this leads to an argument for bottom-up electoral power. Usually, local governments are run for local elites embedded in real estate and development, or the FIRE sector, finance, insurance, real estate. What's the E? Rank and file political bases are stronger market actors. Oh, yeah, and the rank and file for local government usually are other market actors like landlords, business owners, etc. But they are at the whims of capital as much as anyone. Local government does matter. Local door canvass campaigns can reach people without indirect communication. Mass spending is actually unhelpful on the local level, in this case. Local elections are usually uncontested or nonpartisan, which negates some of the obstacles that have been covered. Progressives in the Democratic Party don't change the whole thing and are used to keep others in that party. Otherwise, there are 500,000 positions to run for. Our local governments have many powers to advance our program. Once we demonstrate our competence in local offices, we can then run for state offices, which are still local, mostly, but win with strong field operations using what he calls a checkerboard strategy of direct contact versus using mass media to cover all voters. But unless you're talking and building relationships, they're just simply not going to turn out, not going to care. But another argument for why an independent left party can make headway, like the Greens, that we have, in fact, better conditions. With the growth of the service economy, There's new types of workers that have grown, or rather service workers have grown over the last century, which creates less difference in worker relations or between workers. There's more and more middle class helping professions which are progressive and open to joining with workers. So I didn't write any formal conclusion to all of this. And there's my slides for that, which I totally skipped, but again, they're not well filled out. So let's just get to work because we are not the alternative, but the imperative. Oh, let's say that took me an hour. Oh no, there's almost an hour. So yeah, I'll definitely tighten that up. But anyway, does anyone have any comments or questions? And I can also open the floor to say your piece. How are we feeling?
Hmm.
Did everyone fall asleep?
No, I'm here.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Joanna. I'm not sure if I'm familiar. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. I actually have to take my mother to the hospital tonight, so I'm not able to talk. I just want to thank everybody for the great information. Very interested in the Green Party. I voted Green many times. But no, thank you for all the information. I was kind of in and out of
Right.
listening
Yeah,
because,
you're in
like I said,
crisis. I'm sorry to hear that. I
with
hope
my
things
mom.
work out for your mother.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you for being here. I'm gonna mute. Thank you.
All right.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know if you can hear it, but I am need to make dinner. So otherwise, Alan, any comments, questions, Victoria?
Well, I thought that was actually useful for me since I am kind of new to the Green Party. I mean, I've voted for Green candidates, but never really been an activist or organizer with the party. So yeah, that was helpful.
Cool.
Yeah, I found it very informative as well, and look forward to finding ways